This is by far one of the most best builds for DPSing bosses on the Titan. You're going to be getting a 70% increase in super damage, and you're also going to be getting a 25% increase in damage on your weapons as well. In the gameplay that you are seeing, I did at least 1.8 million, but I know I could do that even further in damage, roughly like 2 million damage, if I had more ammo with my heavy weapon, in which case I'm using the Edge Transit. So this build is primarily towards increasing your weapon damage, weakening tons of targets, and also having increased amount of super damage. And we are going to be using the new Void Super for the Titan. So feel free to hit that like button and also subscribe. And of course, if you guys would like to check out the build, it would be on screen or the dim link will be in the description. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's first start on the exotic armor piece. This is on the Titan mark and it's called the Stoicism. So these perks are going to be randomly rolled, and the perks that I got for this build, on the left column, I got Spirit of the Eternal Warrior. Gain bonus damage for weapons matching your super's element when your super ends. So you are going to be getting a 25% increase in weapon damage that matches your super. So in this case, for me, I am using the Twilight Arsenal, so we are going to be needing to use Void weapons to increase our damage even further. I also do want to mention, you don't really have to use a Void subclass for this build. If you guys choose to use like Arc, Strand, Stasis, or any other subclass in the game, all you would have to do is configure the weapons you are using to match the super, and you should be fine. But for me, I wanted to showcase the new Void Super, so that's why I'm using it for this build. For the right column, I got lucky enough to get Spirit of the Star Eater. This perk is part of the Hunter, aka the Star Eater scales. And here's what it does. While your super energy is full, picking up an orb of power will overcharge your super, granting it bonus damage. So if you have one stack of Feast of Light, it would grant your super 18.2% increased in damage. If you have 2 stacks, it would be 36.4%. If you have 3 stacks, it would be 54.6%. If you have 4 stacks, it would be 59.7% increase in damage. Your 6th stack will give you 64.8%. And lastly, if you have 6 stacks of Feast of Light, it will increase your damage up to 70% of your super damage. And it would also last up to 14 seconds for your super damage. So the more stacks you have, the more damage you're going to be inflicting with your super. So these are the 2 main perks that you're going to need for this build if you want to deal tons of damage. Of course, for the super, we are using Prismatic, so I chose to put Twilight Arsenal because this thing slaps with DPS and it also weakens targets. For your class ability, it doesn't matter what you put, but for me, I chose to put Towering Barricade. For the melee, I chose to put Frenzy Blade because we are using Consecration as one of our aspects just because of ad clear. And for the Void Grenade, I chose to put Suppressor Grenade because we are 1, going to suppress them, which will stun overload champions, and 2, we are going to be weakening them because of this fragment called Facet of Dominance. Your Void Grenades weaken targets and your Arc Grenades jolt targets, but you would get -10 discipline. We could also increase that even further because we are using Void, and it's in our seasonal artifacts. It is called Expanding Abyss. Void sources deal increased damage to weaken targets. So this is the main seasonal artifact mod you're going to want to use for this build if you want to deal increased damage to weakened targets. And for the aspects, as what I mentioned, I am using Consecration. For the second aspect, be sure to go for Knockout. I chose to put is Facet of Purpose. Picking up an Orb of Power will grant me an overshield based on the damage type of your equipped super, but you would get -10 recovery. So the super that we are using is Twilight Arsenal, so we are going to be getting a Void Overshield. Here are the weapons that I was using for this build. For the Kinetic weapon, I'm using the Better Devils. It is now a Strand Hand Cannon, primarily because of the perk called Slice. Whenever we activate our Rally Barricade, it will sever the target whenever we were to hit them. And for the energy weapon, I'm using this Void Sidearm called the Buried Bloodline because if you were to get multi-kills, it would give you Devour. And if you do have Devour, every time you would hit a target, it will weaken them. And for the power weapon, I am using the Edge Transit because this thing slaps because of Bait and Switch, which will give you a plus 30% increase in damage. And also, I am using Envious Assassin, which will give me more ammo in my magazine. If you would like to copy the seasonal artifacts, it will be right here on screen if you like. For the stats, I do recommend going for Resilience because that is broken in PvE, because it would give you a flat 30% damage reduction if you have tier 10, and it would also reduce the cooldown of your class ability because we are on Titan. And for your second stat, you could either go for Intellect or you could go for Discipline. Of course, feel free to hit the like button and also subscribe. I'll greatly appreciate it.